It's now time to introduce, well, what time is it? It's turbo time, ladies and gentlemen. Please welcome to the stage, Daniel Riordan!
Hello, hello. Great to be here.
Oh, thank you for coming. Dan, I always start these panels off by asking the same question to everybody. It always gets a little meta, so bear with me. The first question I always love to ask is, who is Daniel Riordan?
Well, Daniel Riordan is a working actor in Los Angeles that does tons of voiceover and on-camera work as well, and some movies, some TV commercials, but more and more voiceover, games, commercials, and the like.
So, tell us a little bit about your background then. When did you first discover your love of acting and performing?
I was about 8 or 10 years old and I decided to be an actor. And then I went to, I was in community theater and I did theater at school. And then I went to New York University and studied theater. And then I worked in New York a little bit. I came to Los Angeles and I just started to do, my first job was on a soap opera, like one line. I was 20. That was my first gig. And then I started doing TV commercials, and then I did some movies in my early 30s, Pentathlon, and The Adventures of Captain Zoom in Outer Space, and a movie called The Pavilion that I produced and co-wrote. And just basically, commercials, TV, did a lot of guest spots on 3-camera sitcoms, Silver Spoons, and all sorts of shows in the 80s and early 90s and mid-90s. So a lot of TV. And then in the late 90s got into voiceover and suddenly it was like, oh my god, this is great. I mean, it's like, and you get spoiled because it's very little work in terms of, time you have to put in, and you're in the booth, it doesn't matter what you look like, you don't have to go through makeup, and it's very lucrative, so all of a sudden you get very spoiled. I recently did a TV show and I'm like, I can't believe I gotta walk from the trailer to the set and keeping me waiting, and I gotta put on makeup right now. It could be relaxing. I could be. And the recording studios are beautiful. They're like the most luxurious facilities in Los Angeles. Recording studios. So they have everything. They have private chefs and they have cappuccino, and they're all beautifully designed inside. They're like a tomb. They're like a windowless thing. They want to keep you in there. They want to make sure the clients don't leave to go to lunch. They bring in lunch. They cook for them. So it's a very nice environment. And even if you're working for a few hours, it's pretty painless.
So going back to when you were 10 years old, what was the impetus to become an actor? Was there anybody that you looked up to, or one?
Yeah, I used to love like Al Pacino and watching old movies, Spencer Tracy, and Cary Grant, and just old movies. I just love movies, and I was like, I want to really do that, And then a lot of the people were really good, and you kind of get attracted to talent, even if you can't describe exactly why. You realize years later, oh my God, I knew that guy was good, and it was Spencer Tracy. He stood out. And then there was a lot of great movies. Like I grew up in the 70s mostly, and I was a kid in the 70s, and there were some fantastic movies, and Al Pacino and Gene Hackman and guys like that. It was such an inspiration, and you realize, oh, I want to do that. I want to tell those stories. I want to be on camera. I want to enjoy that lifestyle. So ultimately, you have to go to Los Angeles. There is no other place. So I was from Northern California, but I went to New York to study theater, and then I came from New York and went straight to Los Angeles. I got in LA when I was about 20, and then went back to finish my final year of school. At 21, I was in LA from then on, until today. But yeah, it's kind of a company town.
Yeah. Just to let you guys know as well, while we're having a lovely chat, we are going to have people running around with some microphones. So if you do have any questions, feel free to stick your hand up, and we'll get to you. Do we have some mic runners? There we go. Great. So does anybody have any questions right off the bat? Yeah, we've got a gentleman here. Run, Jimmy.
feel voicing a giant flying hound?
I feel powerful. I feel very powerful. It's funny you ask that because it's really true. You have to treat it, I think all these characters you have to treat with respect, and you have to actually get inside the head of it and give it some emotion. I always thought of Megatron as an intellectual, as like an evil intellectual. Even though it was a machine, you know, it wasn't just one note. There was like an upper crust kind of, you know, whoever created it was maybe that person. So I always saw him as very, very intelligent, very articulate, kind of like a degenerate elegance to him. So I think when you voice even a robot, you've got to infuse it with life. And it's like any acting, you have to kind of find something you can relate to. And for me, it was, you know, the intelligence of the character, the intelligence of Megatron, the power of Megatron. Ultimately, lies in his intelligence, not just his body, because he's leading all these other people. So it's his strategy that prevails generally, or tries to prevail. So yeah, that's how I feel. I feel very empowered.
It's
same to you.
It's interesting that you bring that up because how familiar were you with the brand prior to joining Robots in Disguise?
You know, I was familiar with it, but I wasn't incredibly familiar with it. It was after doing it, you know, many hours. We had an interesting situation because Robots in Disguise was originally a Japanese anime in Japanese. So when it was bought by the Saban Entertainment Group in Los Angeles, they wanted it all dubbed into English, obviously. So our job was to dub the already existing animation into English. And it's always the other way around in voiceover. You always start with the voice, and then they animate to your voice. And to the extent of even having cameras on your face to get your facial movements, your articulation, so that the animators can work with that and get an even more precise characterization as they're animating, even if it's a monster or a robot. We do this for games. There's motion capture for games as well, where they motion capture your entire body to get that same character effect. So this was an interesting situation where, and it's really the only time I think I've done it besides doing ADR for a film, where after a movie sometimes they need to pick up a line or change a line, or the audio was off on a line, and you'll go into an ADR recording and they'll have the movie up on the screen, and they run the movie, and there's these beeps in your headphone, and on the fourth beep you hit it and you match the movement of your own mouth generally. So aside from that, I've never done it before or since, where for, you know, I don't know, 30 episodes? Something like that, 20, 30 episodes? It was a lot. Yeah, maybe even 40 episodes. We had to match the movements. So in the recording session, when they had the script written, and we would work with the animation and have to watch the animation and pace ourselves, sometimes it just wouldn't fit what they had written. So they were rewriting on the spot to match the mouth movements that were originally in Japanese. So they would change words just to more easily match the existing movement. So that was a very interesting thing. Not only were we having to match that movement, but they were actually having to change lines to match the movement.
I think we've got a question down here.
What was it like working on Mass Effect 3?
On
Mass Effect 3.
Again, really fun. You know what's so great about working on Mass Effect 3 and all these different shows is the amount of love and time that the creators put into it. And they've been working on it for years before you come in. When you go into the recording booth, they've hired you based on your audition. You know, they've heard you. But it's not until you really go into the booth and they're all present. Sometimes they're from all over the world, from Japan or whatever, they fly them in. And when you speak, it's the first time they've really heard their vision come to life. And it's a really exciting moment. They get very, very excited. And you realize you're part of this huge team effort. That it's really their dream that's been kind of brewing for a long time. So I love Mass Effect, and I love a lot of the other games and shows that I've done because there's so much rich life and text within the show. They've created these worlds that you can really get behind. And again, you're in this windowless, sealed, very comfortable tomb-like environment, and when you are alone in that booth with your headphones on, you can really get into it. You can really go there, especially when you have people who are explaining to you in great detail their vision and what that world is like. I mean, when they're describing it, it's as if they're describing, their own world. They know every nuance and how they want it played and how they want the voice to be, and what's going on emotionally, and what's going on politically in the game. It's fascinating. So it was fun to work on that stuff. Very fun. Thank you.
You talked a little bit there about obviously having to sync to the animation because it was originally part robots. When you were doing the recording sessions, were you recording with the other actors? I would imagine when you're doing something, it's much more of a solo experience. How does that work for you, not having...
Yeah, it's rare that you are working with other actors. I have done it. There's been some shows, some games I worked on. But a long time ago. It was more something that was done maybe 15 or 20 years ago. I think there were scenes in Transformers where we did work as a group. I seem to remember that. But if it was Megatron heavy, then I would be alone in the booth. But I did work on a Disney film, an animated Disney film, Ratatouille, and we were working on that, and that was in a group on a soundstage. So we literally walked and talked, we were mic'd, and we were not on camera, but we moved and walked the scene with each other. And that was like, again, I've never done that before, so it made perfect sense. I remember the directors turning to me going, "Can you believe they haven't done this? They always record you guys individually." He was not an animation guy, so he was like, "This is very unusual." But it was helpful, because you actually have the other actor. I prefer it. It'd be great if we could record as a group, but generally they don't want you to overlap. They want very little overlapping. It's much harder for them to animate that.
Gentleman down here.
Hello, Ryan.
Hi.
Between Megatron and Alduin, during the recording process, which one did you have more fun at voice acting from?
Oh, I think Alduin was more fun. Did you ask me which was more fun? Yeah. Alduin for me was more fun because he had his own language. And in fact, one of the reasons I got the job was because I was able to, in one take, do the language. It's all written phonetically. And it's this unusual language. And again, the guys who created this game, they speak that language. I mean, they don't just invent, it's not gibberish. They worked it out. I know they did that on Game of Thrones as well. But they worked it out where it's actually dialogue that they can reinterpret. And so, being able to speak that in one fell swoop, that was one of the things that got me the job. And so for me, to speak in that language was really exciting. That was really cool. So Megatron's fun because he's got that whole, destroy them, you will be destroyed. But Alduin has the language, which is kind of some bizarre hybrid of it's almost like a Gaelic meets Eastern European. It's but it's got some great lilting to it. It's what is that? Kind of like like that, right? It's very cool.
Thank you.
Why can't you give Skybite a break?
Pardon me?
Why can't you give Skybite a break?
Oh, because he's a little bastard. He needs to be put down at every turn. Destroy him. Terrorize Skybite.
But he's your second in command.
He's always, he's way too big for his robotic britches, let me tell you. His pistons are just a little too big.
Now, are you talking about Skybite or are you talking about Peter Spellos at this point?
Pardon me, Papa.
Are you talking about Skybite or are you talking about Peter Spellos at this point?
Oh, exactly, right. I think both.
I've got a question for you. And I always find this fascinating. You were talking earlier about how you like voice acting because it's convenient, it's comfortable.
Right.
You don't have to worry about it. But what is it like to play a Klingon? Fascinated to.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that was amazing, actually. Yeah, Duras. I played Duras in Enterprise. That was a recurring role. I was actually, the show predates even the original Star Trek, so I was Worf's great-great-grandfather in the art. I was the first Klingon they ever met. So we were engaged with the Enterprise in battle. That was the first time they'd ever come in across a Klingon. And so we got to do the classic. This was like a boyhood dream come true, because when you work on that show, when you work on Star Trek, it's unlike any other show. Number one, Paramount is my favorite studio because it's intact. It's in the center of Hollywood. It's been around since the early 20s. The sound stages are huge. They're in perfect shape. Nothing has really changed on the interior of the lot. It's still, the buildings are very much like they were in the 20s and 30s, and the departments are very much like they were, like the makeup room. Nothing's changed since like 1935 in terms of the architecture, the windows, the doors. Everything is, really handcrafted. The sound stages themselves, way up in the eaves of the sound stages, are massive beams that they hang the lights from, wooden beams. And on those beams are etched the names and the dates and the movies, going all the way back to the silent era. The crew traditionally takes a knife and puts their names in the beams. And I've gone up there and looked at it. It's fascinating. So there's a lot of history there. And when I went into do Star Trek, everybody on the show is a big fan. So you don't work on a lot of shows that you're a fan of. Like, I'm a huge fan of Star Trek. So to be on the show and to be with all these other people working on the show, including the crew, and certainly Michael Westmore, the head of the makeup department, Academy Award winner for Mask. He's worked on all the Star Trek shows except the very first one. And he was like a master. And to be with him and to be with all the other people that are so excited to be on the show was a totally different experience. So everybody's excited, like really into the show. And then I got to do the thing where, we're on the deck of the Klingon ship, and we're getting blasted by the Enterprise, and it's this, I mean, the back and forth, classic. I'm getting hit by photons. It's like amazing, and I broke the set piece. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. I just smashed the desk at the console that I was at. And the crew came up to me and they said, no, that's totally cool. That's great, man. You really got into it. You're a true Klingon. We'll repair it in a minute. That's great, that's great. Give it all you got. So that's kind of atmosphere that was on the set. Everybody is really supportive and really into going for it 100%. But yeah, it took 3.5 hours to get into makeup and 2 hours to get out of makeup.
And that wasn't Enterprise wasn't your first go around with Star Trek,
no.
Was it? As far as back as Next Generation?
Yeah, Next Generation I played a character called Riordan with webbed hands. And he was a guy from a planet where they're kind of all bullies. And Wesley, I bumped into Wesley, or Wesley bumps into me accidentally and he apologizes, and I jump down his throat, and then Wesley comes back at me, and I'm like, you are my friend now. And I'm like, oh, let's go have a moment. Let's go have a milkshake. But yeah, and then that's the way you deal with guys from my planet. So yeah, Riordan with the web hands. And then DS9, I worked on DS9, and then of course, as Duras on the Enterprise. That was my favorite.
I can imagine, yeah. It's an iconic episode. As you say, for the first meeting. And just to be a Klingon, I just imagine that's something you just put on your CV, Klingon.
Oh yeah. And also, when they like to hire, I'm like 6'5", they like to hire big guys. You have to have that whole voice. And it's in that realm of Skyrim, of Alduin and Megatron. You will not pass. You will be destroyed. Your ship will be destroyed. That whole Klingon thing. And then they put you in this costume, and you feel like a rock star because you've got these huge shoulders and really long hair. this high, and you're wearing these really tight pants and this vest, and you walk around and you're just like, I'm a stud, watch out. And you can see like people looking at you going, whoa, this is, you know, people on the set like responding because it's powerful, you're like bigger than life. So it felt really cool to be this guy. Huge shoulder pads on you, and you're like, you know, massive, powerful, and very good looking. That goes without saying, of course.
Of course. Do we have any? We've got a gentleman over here.
Hello. Hi. Years ago, I heard Neil Kaplan speak about how he replaced you a small bit and you weren't available as Megatron. Have you ever filled in for anyone else?
No, I haven't, except in 2007, I did another pass at Transformers, but it was for a game in 2007. So I never filled in for anybody else. It was kind of like, I kind of stood alone in doing that one show. And then, there's been obviously several incarnations of Megatron, different voices. But no, I've never filled in for anybody else. Though I'd like to. I would gladly do it.
So that's right,
I'm shameless.
You did do the video game in 2007. How do you find working on video games compared to animation? Because, especially with something like Mass Effect, because it's multiple choice almost for the characters, the scripts must be huge in some cases.
They're huge. Excuse me. Some of the video games take several years to make in terms of even my time, my recording time. So you're not working like every day, but you work for 3 or 4 days, let's say in February, and 3 or 4 days in June, and 3 or 4 days in December, and then you'll come back the next year in April and work 3 or 4 days, and each day you're working 4 hours. That's the union rules. They can only have you for 4 hours. And sometimes I'm doing 300, 350 lines of dialogue. And depending on how they like to work, they always start very slow. You always start very slowly. So like I said before, they like to describe the world, the game, the character. I mean, almost to the point where like, okay, I got it. I just loud, soft. You already hired me for my voice, like angry, sad. That's all I really need. But they want to get into the whole world, and it is fascinating. And then at a certain point, you start and you record a line, and they'll really worry on the line. They'll take a lot of time to give you direction and to change it or to highlight this or that. And then at the end of the day, you kind of, by the end of the day, you're moving very quickly because now you're kind of all in the same group. You've got the character, you've kind of fine-tuned it to what they want. They see that you understand the situations that you're in. And so they'll come in and say, well, okay, in this situation, you're fighting off, the evil monster, and you're slightly wounded, so you're a little exhausted, and we want to hear a little pain in your voice, something like that. So you'll give them a couple of takes. And sometimes it's a line that, like an in-game line, like a player, a player line, or a line that to prompt a player. It's going to come back into the game like several times, like "good job" or "get it," So then you'll do like that softly, loudly, intensely, so that they have a variety that they can put in different places in the game. And sometimes the line will be shifted slightly, so it'll be "get him" or "get him now," "get him then," So there's a lot of that. But sometimes 300, 350 lines in a session of 4 hours, they'll slate 4 hours, but if you get through the lines, and I usually can get through like those lines in more like 2 hours. Because once you start rolling, just boom, 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 take. And they have it on a screen, it's all on a computer. So they just bring it up on the monitor that's in the booth, and they just run it, highlight the lines, and then just scroll. So you're hitting it. So it takes time. You don't really realize what they're doing with it until you see the animation. I have Days Gone.
Yes.
Yeah, because they kept changing the name. That's another thing they did. Remember when they give you a secret name when you audition? So it'll be like Project X or Bluebird. And then all of a sudden, by the time it's done, it's Days Gone. But before that, they had something else like Apocalypse Rider or something like that we worked on. But yeah, that's about to come out. That's a great game. I worked on that. I've been working on that for 2 years, doing a lot of motion capture as well. So did animated from that as well. We act out the scenes on the soundstage. You know, dots all over our bodysuits, and this will be the. Let's say this will be the car. It's just a table. You work around it, and they have cameras all over. It's a white room. It's really cool.
I'm interested. Obviously, you said that originally TV, movie work, things like that. That's what you were after. Nowadays, celebrities will have no problem in doing a voiceover for a movie or something like that.
Right.
But 10 years ago, unless you got a Disney gig, right, that generally wasn't this. Was there any trepidation for you going in, wanting to be a TV and movie actor, to actually going into the voice?
Yes, yeah, it's funny you said that because in the beginning, in the late 90s, I kind of fell into voiceover. I was actually working while I was working on Jingle All the Way as Turbo Man, and Richard Mall was playing the evil guy in this movie within a movie. In the beginning of the film, there's the TV show, which is kind of like a movie within a movie, and Richard Mall is the evil guy with the big head thing. And we were working together, and he was like, "You got a great voice. Have you done voiceover?" And I said, "No, I thought about it. I've never really done it." It was kind of like in those days. It was like, I'm an on-camera actor. I don't do, necessarily do that stuff, or I want to do that stuff. And he's like, "No, you should do it. It's great. It's fun. It's lucrative." And I'm like, "Okay." He goes, "I'll set you up with my agents." Well, it turned out we had the same agent. Agency. I was there for commercials. He was there for voiceover. So they set me up, and they took me for voiceover, and I booked my first job, like out of the gate. It was like a commercial, radio commercial. And I was like, "Oh, this is great." And I didn't book again for like 2 months, and then they just dropped me. They kept me for on-camera commercials, but they dropped me for voiceover. So I was like, "Okay, I tried it. Whatever." I'm doing a lot of TV shows. I'm doing these movies and stuff. I'm fine. And then I had a production company, and one of my partners is a lawyer who'd been a manager, and his assistant had just moved over to ICM to be a voiceover agent. And he said, "Mark, you should give it one more try. Mark's over at ICM, and he knows you, and let me make a call." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So he called this guy, Mark Quinn, and I went over there, and he put me in the booth, and we knew each other like socially. And he said, "Okay, you got a great instrument. Listen to everything I say, and within a couple of years, you'll be making some money." And I was like, "Okay." And that's exactly what happened. And then I followed him through several agencies to where I am now. But yeah, and then I realized as things changed with new media coming in and encroaching on residuals from network. There used to be only 3 networks in America: ABC, NBC, and CBS, and we have very good contracts. You make a lot of money when they run the show a second time, a third time, and that's how most actors live. So that's kind of gone away. But with voiceover, because you can do so many commercials, and those commercials still run on network, you get those residuals. So everybody wants to do voiceover because it's much more secure than even having your own show on cable TV. I don't know what the equivalent is here, but cable TV might be a great show, a lot of prestige, but you only get paid to do the work. You don't get any really residuals, and so the money runs out as soon as the show's over. So everybody wants to do voiceovers, and now you're competing with a lot of stars and celebrities where before they would have never done it. But of course, people like myself and DC Douglas is still so much better that it doesn't matter. We just keep talking ourselves into success. That's my methodology. Just keep telling myself that.
And I think we've seen almost a shift, maybe only in the last year or so, a couple of years, where big productions that require voiceovers are actually relying more now on traditional voiceover talent than Tom Cruise playing Winnie the Pooh, for example, where, you know, now obviously we have that. So that must be a great reward for you to know that that's happening.
Yes, a lot of the times we can go in and we can knock it out in one take, you know, or two takes. I mean, we don't flop, we move fast. Like I said, 350 lines of dialogue in 2 hours, boom, boom, boom. And you can get a big star in there who's a great actor on camera, but it's not a voiceover person. It's another set of tools. You know, it's another skill set. So they can go in there and really fumble and be very nervous, and they have to cut together maybe 6 or 7 takes to get one line right, where we just move, boom, boom, really quickly. So unless you have a recognizable voice, or the people, let's say in a commercial, let's say it's Mercedes-Benz, and they want a Tom Cruise, in part because they want to hang out with Tom Cruise. So they'll pay him $1 million. And the average person may not even recognize his voice. But certain distinct voices, like Morgan Freeman is a master, you know. Peter Coyote is an amazing narrator and also a great actor. So you can recognize their voices. But yes, it's gratifying to know that at the end of the day, the people that do it best can continue to work. But you're always going to have big stars doing animation because more and more of them are actually good at it. And number two, their name recognition still sells the product, and that's what it's about. But there's always a place for us too, the working actor.
Do we have any?
Hi.
Hi.
Do you have a favourite story or experience of working with like a director or a fellow voice actor?
Being a voice actor?
Do you have a favourite story or experience you've had working with a voice director or voice actor?
Oh, working with a famous actor? Or?
No, so working with other ones. Yeah. So for instance, some of the, Wally Burr talked about how awkward Orson Welles was when they did the G1 cartoon, for instance. Do you have any experiences like that in your...
My experiences with other actors, I think, has generally been because voiceover is so individually recorded generally. That my more interesting experiences have been in live action TV shows or in movies. Okay, there's a movie called Ed Wood with Johnny Depp. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's a great black and white kind of a cult favorite at this point. And the guy who played Bela Lugosi, who eventually got an Academy Award for the show, and I am completely spacing on his name. Anyway, we were on the set at the time and saying, you're gonna get nominated for an Academy Award for this because he's playing Bela Lugosi and he's so good. And at the time I smoked cigarettes, and it was myself and Johnny Depp and completely blanking. You know who I'm talking about? And you're blanking, yeah. It's right on the tip of my tongue. But anyway, they cordoned off a little area with tape on the set. Martin Landau, thank you. Jet lag. Martin Landau, who got an Academy Award for playing Bela Lugosi in Ed Wood, and the three of us would sit together in these folding chairs and smoke. And so we spent a lot of time talking to each other, and he was fascinating because he had a lot of great Hollywood stories because he'd worked with Hitchcock and all these other people. But I think what was fun was being with him, seeing him work towards the end of his career, giving like this amazing performance. And Johnny Depp and I were both like, and Johnny Depp was the star of the movie, but Johnny Depp and I were both like just listening to everything this guy had to say. Martin Landau, he was so knowledgeable, and he has so many great, rich stories. And then to watch his performance, which is also this masterful performance that takes like a whole career to kind of get to that point where less is more. And, his emotional work was so interior but so powerful. And we were like, you are going to get nominated for an Academy Award. He went, oh no, please, guys, no. And he did, and he won. So that was always, I love that story. That guys saw it on the set, you know, his fellow actors. And it wasn't like a group thing, it was just the three of us going, the two of us, Johnny Depp and I, saying, you're gonna get nominated now. You're doing unbelievable work here. So the camaraderie between actors, I mean real actors, is, you know, it's almost like when you're off the set, the world decides who's a star. That's when the pay scale, the level of fame. But if you're a true dyed-in-the-wool actor, like that's your calling, it's almost like the priesthood or something. And that you relate to each other as a tribe. So it doesn't matter that like Johnny Depp is this huge star. He's a real actor. So he responds to other real actors. Even if you're working with a child, if they're like, they've got that thing, that inner talent, I relate to, let's say, a 10-year-old kid that I'm working with a lot more in some ways than my adult friends, because we are speaking this language, like this patois, you know, this artistic patois that most other people don't speak. And sometimes you'll say to this kid, you go, how about like, is this your idea? Do you really want to do this? Because so many kids get pushed into acting from their parents. And I've worked with children who are like, oh my God, oh yeah, this is what I want to do. I took the lead. I've always wanted to do this. I'm born to do this. And it's so great because you have this understanding. So there was that wonderful understanding on that movie, where the three of us were kind of this little club. You know, when you leave it, you know, this guy's more famous, this guy's more famous, they make more money. But in that moment, we're all on the same page, we're brethren. And that's the beauty of acting, actually.
I need to ask, because whenever we're starting to put this convention together, we're always looking at who we're going to have, who we're going to bring over, and things like that. And obviously, whenever we get the opportunity to bring a new Megatron to the convention, it's always great. But for me, ever since I was probably about 12 or 13 years old, every Christmas, on time, it's Jingle All the Way.
Yeah.
So I just need to ask about Turbo Man, because that was good. So how did that come about then?
That was kind of an exciting story. He's asking about Jingle All the Way, where I played Turbo Man. It was '96, and I had done Captain Zoom, The Adventures of Captain Zoom. I was Captain Zoom. I starred in that show in '95, May of '95, and this was like January, February of '96. Brian Levant, who wrote and produced Captain Zoom, and we became very close. He was directing Jingle All the Way, and so he wanted me to play Turbo Man. Absolutely. I had just gotten married, and we were on our honeymoon in Morocco, and we were there for like a month. And this is early '96, so no cell phones. You know, no cell phone, no computer with us. You couldn't get much signal anyway, even if you did. We'd been on a camel trek in the Western Sahara, come back to this Cosmo. I mean, it sounds like, but it's true. We came back after these camels, and there was one phone at the reception desk, and I remember like, it's all a mud, you know, brick building, the tile, and it's these inner courtyards. It looks like it's right out of, you know, some Arabian Nights. And there's birds flitting in and out of the open windows down the hallway. And there was one phone, and I said, I really just have a feeling I should call LA and check in, because Captain Zoom they were still trying to sell it, and I wanted to see if there was any news about that show. And I called Brian's production office, and the assistant who knew me was like, oh my God, we've been looking for you, Brian wants you, we want you back in LA. And I'm like, for what? And he goes, Turbo Man, you gotta come right now. Stay on the line. And it was the first I'd heard of it. And so they said, they got one of the producers on the line and said, you need to travel tomorrow morning out of Marrakesh and fly to London, and then fly to LA, and you're gonna have a fitting at like 3 in the morning at the studio at Paramount. They're gonna do a full body cast for your costume, and then we're gonna put you on the next plane back to London, back to your honeymoon in Marrakesh. So it was like a 3-day thing. And they were like, we're so sorry, we don't want to interrupt your vacation, your honeymoon. I'm like, no, it's okay. You know, it's a job. And they said Brian would not hire anybody else. He was waiting for you. And it actually got him in trouble because he had to actually have auditions. He knew he didn't want to hire anybody else, but he had to have auditions just to placate the producers because they were getting very nervous. Like, this bodysuit needs to be made like right now. So Arnold Schwarzenegger had his bodysuit made a few days before me. And then they were, where's Dan, where's Dan, where's Dan? And they couldn't find me because I'm in Morocco. So it was only because I called and then they said, there'll be a ticket waiting for you in Marrakesh. You have to be in Marrakesh by 8 o'clock the next morning. So like very early, like 5 o'clock in the morning, we drove back over the Atlas Mountains from the Western Sahara. And I was panicking because when we drove there, it was during the day, and it was really slow. There were like goats in the road and camels and people, and the villages were all clogged, and there were markets. And I was like, there's no way we're going to make it. But at 5 in the morning, everything was dead quiet. The roads were open. We cruised back over the mountains. I left my newlywed bride in a hotel in Marrakesh. I got on a plane to London. It's the first time I was in London. And in fact, that was the last time I was in England. It was '96. It was for that trip. And then I got to LA, and sure enough, a car was waiting, and they whisked me to Paramount, and there was a whole crew waiting with their molds and their waxes. You know, I had to stand there and they put all this stuff on me, and then it had to dry. It took like, I don't know, almost an hour, and you had to be very, very still. And I'm essentially naked inside, encased in this, this plaster. They very carefully take it off. The car whisks me back to my house for like 2 hours sleep, and then I'm on the next plane back to London. And it was crazy. And then I remember what was really exciting was when they flew me out of Marrakesh, they got me to London, and I was supposed to continue on immediately. And I said, well, where's the plane? Where's the plane? They said, well, there's no planes going to Los Angeles tonight. I was like, you're kidding me. I'm supposed to go to LA. And I called the studio, they're like, oh, yeah, we made a mistake, sorry. You're gonna have to stay in London. But they go, look, we're gonna put you up at Brown's Hotel. That's where we put all the executives. And I'm like, Brown's Hotel? I knew nothing about this place. And they're just like, you're gonna like it. Just relax, you're gonna like it. And it was like, I mean, unreal, this place. It's like, my room is like a quarter of the size of this hall. It's nuts. But it's a beautiful old hotel. I'm sure you're familiar with it. I've never been there. I haven't been there since. But that was my introduction to London. The cabbie said, oh, let me take you around and show you Buckingham Palace. Give me like the short tour. And it was really fun.
And how much of your acting skill and acting ability did you put to use when you had to deliver the news to your newlywed bride that you were leaving the honeymoon?
Oh, she was all about the money. She had no problem. She would have driven me herself if she could have done it. I will drive you across the Atlantic. Go make the money. I'll be fine. And then of course there were all these French models that were staying at, male models that were staying at the hotel, who took her under their wing. So she had these nights like feasting with all these guys, these gorgeous French models who just loved her to death. It was just terrible. So she had a great time.
Do we have any other questions in the audience? No? Brilliant. Oh, we got one here. Yeah.
Hi. What's the most difficult voice role you've ever done?
Wow. That's tough. I think any voice that requires, it's got to be for games, for sure. And the reason what I qualify as tough is when it hurts my voice. So anytime you're doing the death screams, the attacks, that is the hardest thing I've ever done. And there's been different characters. Even some of Alduin in Skyrim was part of the voice. The death screams, the roars, the guttural sort of sounds. After a while, you get to the point where you only audition with voices that you can sustain. In the beginning, you might give your all, and really scream and really get into it. And then when they hire you, they expect you to do that, and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to destroy my voice. And it does hurt. Sometimes you can't. For example, I was doing the voice of Kia, the car company, and there were times where I was like, I can't can't do this game in this way to this degree because I've got to record either later today or tomorrow this commercial spot, and it's going to wreck my voice. And it takes your voice sometimes a day or two to recover. Just imagine just screaming until your throat is raw. So I think the most difficult is, it's not so much acting. The acting part's fine, and that's what I love about voiceover, because you can really get into it, and it's all about your voice and your inflection and your perception and your inner life, and so it's a lot of fun as an actor. But technically, the thing that's hard is hurting your voice, screaming, death screams. So when you hear those in a game, know that those are very carefully done. Like, you know, they can't ask for too much. It's always done at the end of the session. And our union actually has a lot of rules about that, but over the years it's gotten better and better. As games have gotten more cinematic, it's actually saved us, because now it's much more of an intellectual and character-driven narrative instead of just a pure, you know, responsive action narrative. So there's less screams necessary in general. My favorite characters are when I can play like intelligence or quiet evil, anything that where you can use your voice. It's sinister and very scary instead of loud. More like that. That's fun to me. But yeah, it's the harshness of the voice, hurting your voice.
Lovely. Well, we're just about out of time.
Please, no. Let me stay.
Would you like to perform for the people?
Sure, what would you like?
I don't know. Is there anything that immediately springs to mind as an audition piece?
Let me see. What springs to mind? Well, I think one of my favorite characters is more like when I go into doing a lot of evil, ghost-like characters, because I think I've done about over 100 video games. So there's kind of a general kind of tone I use for like evil, especially kind of spiritual. I can just kind of riff on that. Like I said, I did a little bit of Alderman before. Maybe I can do a bit more of that. You will die.
I know I'm terrified now.
But also something more like, as we whisper through the universe of darkness, there will be a time when all men fall together and writhe under my power. Thank you very much. I'm so flattered to be here. So thank you for having me. It was great talking with you guys.
Thank you. Does anybody have one last question? Yeah, gentleman right at the front here. Send us home. Give us a good one.
Well, first, welcome to TF Nation.
Thank you so much.
Neil Kaplan was here and he said that the instructions for doing Optimus Prime is basically doing a version of Peter Cullen. What instructions were given to you to create Megatron?
Oh, to create Megatron? Well, this is interesting. There were no instructions except formidable, like something like formidable robotic voice, deep register, frightening yet in control, something like that. That's what they usually write. And then you kind of do your spin on it, your version of it. And they listen and they hire you based on your interpretation. So it's a very general, with all the voice auditions, it's a very general note, like deep register or evil intelligence or ethereal or slight British accent. They often ask for that. There's a lot of that. Or guttural, or monotone, or clinical scientist. You know, so it's those kinds of directions, and then you just kind of do your take on what that is. And with Megatron, like I said before, for me it was, yes, he was a robot, yes, he was evil, but I always kind of thought of him in kind of elegant terms. like he was this intellectual. He had a kind of elegance about him. That even if he was like an upper crust evil robot, if that makes any sense. I felt like, and I think you really have to approach it that way. You have to think of them and take it very seriously, and respect the character, even if it's an animated character, and you have to flesh it out. You have to give it dimension. So for Megatron, it was, for me, my take on that on those stage directions were to do this kind of, I am Megatron. You will not defy me. I have come before, and I shall come again. Terrorize.
Yes.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Thanks.
Excellent. Well, Dan, thanks again for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, a big